Good morning, everyone. Welcome. My name is Elizabeth Gessel, and I'm the Director of Public Programs at Museum of the African Diaspora in San Francisco. MOAD is a contemporary art museum, and our exhibitions and programming inspire learning through the global lens of the African diaspora. I want to acknowledge the challenging circumstances that still remain even as our spaces begin to open up and expand. MOAD stands in solidarity with Black Lives Matter in recognizing and condemning the white supremacy and the ongoing systemic violence against Black people. We honor and mourn the senseless murders of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Tony McDade, Dante Wright, and Ma'Khia Bryant. We grieve for so many others who have lost their lives at the hands of state-sanctioned violence, including those whose names we do not know. We want to acknowledge that MOAD's commitment to racial justice is ongoing, and as such, we will continue to say their names, to hold space, and to honor these victims. As many of us are settlers, immigrants, or descendants of those forcefully brought to this continent, our institutions were founded upon exclusions and erasures of the indigenous peoples on whose land we are located. With deep respect, MOAD acknowledges that even in virtual space, we reside on unceded native lands and thank the Ramaytush and Chochenyo Ohlone people of the Bay Area who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. Thank you for joining us today, with a special acknowledgement for MOAD members and those of you who have donated to the museum during the pandemic. We're so grateful for your support. I would also like to thank today's sponsors for making the programming possible: First Republic, the Wilson Sonsini Goodrich and Rosati Foundation, and Poets and Writers. Today we're here to celebrate Juneteenth, our newest federal holiday in recognition of the end of the institution of slavery. This is just one small step in the ongoing fight for racial equality and justice, and in the quest for an America whose reality reflects its ideals as we strive for a more perfect union. We begin today's celebration with a roundtable, Rock and Roll Heretics, Shredding While Black and Female. And what better way to celebrate freedom than a program about rock and roll? I'm honored to introduce today's guest, Sikivu Hutchinson. She's a writer, educator, director, and amateur guitarist. Her books and plays include Humanists in the Hood, Unapologetically Black, Feminist, and Heretical, White Nights, Black Paradise, and the novel Rock and Roll Heretic, The Life and Times of Rory Tharpe. And this book, The Rock and Roll Heretic, The Life and Times of Rory Tharpe, is available for purchase from MOAD's online bookstore. She's the founder of the Women's Leadership Project, Black Feminist Mentoring and Civic Engagement Program for Girls of Color in South L.A., and a co-facilitator of the Black LGBTQI+ Parent and Caregiver group. I also want to recognize our panelists will include Samantha Ghetto Songbird Hollins, Gabriella Guitar Gabby Logan, Zori Petrus, and moderating today's event, Brianna Parnell. And you'll hear more about each of these women as Sikivu introduces them throughout the program. So thank you all, and I welcome you, Sikivu, to today's program.
Good morning. Thanks so much, Elizabeth. I really appreciate your sponsorship and support of this event, the support and sponsorship of the Museum of the African Diaspora, as well as Poets and Writers. And I'm going to start by, first of all, just saying words of appreciation about the historic transition that we're making with the recognition of Juneteenth as a federal holiday, and also to give a shout out to the fact that this is Pride Month as well as Black Music Month. We have all these intersections operating, and certainly they're going to inform the powerful discussion you're going to hear from the panelists this morning. I'm going to introduce our first panelist, Samantha Ghetto Songbird Hollins. And she's going to talk a little bit about what she did this morning for Juneteenth as a trailblazing guitarist on the East Coast. Samantha is an independent rock and roll singer, songwriter, guitarist from North Philadelphia. Since 2001, her cult fan base has watched her blaze stages nonstop at legendary rock venues, including CBGB's in New York, The Bitter End, also in New York, Whiskey A Go Go here in LA, the Troubadour in London, and the overthrust Wintermania Metal Fest in Botswana, with hundreds of shows under her belt. She was also the curator of her own festival, Wingdom Fest, a show that gave space to alternative artists of African descent and all genders. Ghetto Songbird recorded her Alley of the Earth EP in LA in 2002 with the help of her mentor, Rosa Lee Brooks, a recording artist in the 60s who wrote and recorded with Hendrix. And the first single landed the Songbird on the classic BET show 106 and Park in front of many music execs in a time that young Black women rocking with an aggressive electric guitar were too taboo for the mainstream. Good morning, Samantha Ghetto Songbird.
Good morning.
So talk to us a little bit about your Culture Rock Griot platform, your career as a visionary, trailblazing, pushing back against respectability politics guitarist, and Juneteenth, your performance this morning.
I started like you read in 2001. Back then, there were not a lot of women of African descent visible doing rock and roll in those venues where you see legendary artists like the Metallica and all those bands play. So at that point, I was very confused and I was wondering where are these spaces? And I didn't realize at that point that I had to help create those spaces and places. And in that quest, later on, I believe, spawned the Culture Rock Griot, which actually came from my Wingdom festival that started from 2005 to 2008 in Philadelphia. We paid homage to the elders in the music industry. We got to bring forth George Clinton, Mandrill, and Lloyd Smith of the Barcades. So I wanted to kind of continue that in this day and age with my journey, because as I travel all over the world, I meet a lot of legends that don't get their just due, as well as newcomers that I believe that should have been further ahead in their careers. So I wanted to use my platform to help others make that leap and also show them that there's other directions you can go besides the mainstream. So through the Culture Rock Griot, it may not be a big brand name, but I believe that if I can get our culture to actually come together and push brands like this, not just mine, because there's many brands like this, that we can actually create a noise for the underground to finally come to the foreground. So the Juneteenth show that I did today, almost about an hour ago or two, I'm still sweating from that. It was really great, and I say it's really great for so many reasons, because number one, I haven't performed with my band in over a year since the COVID shutdown. And also, I always wanted my first show back to be something special. I didn't know how it was going to be, what it was going to be, and when it was going to be, but I knew that I wanted to give it to the ancestors, because through them, I'm doing what I'm doing. And while I was on stage, I paid homage to Elizabeth Cotton and Sister Rosetta Tharpe, just to let them know, because when I get on the stage, I represent something way bigger than myself. If it was not for them, I would not be able to do what I'm doing. And even the ones that came later on, like the Betty Davises and the Tina Turners, all those women broke down those barriers. And I always say broke the glass ceiling as well as the concrete ground to make it possible to do what I'm doing right now in my era, which was the early 2000s. And now we're open those doors for this next generation. So that's my pride in Juneteenth today, paying homage to the ancestors and their Orishas and really opening that space and that energy within this next chapter of Samantha Hollins, the Ghetto Songbird. So I got a question for you, sis. I love your book. I am a huge fan. Please tell me about this brilliant piece of work that you've done and what inspired you to do it. And thank you for representing us.
Absolutely. So I want to say that I view this work and really this panel as an act of reclamation, hearkening back to what you just said, reclaiming and recuperating spaces where we have been shut out from and excluded and erased, despite having pioneered rock music, having pioneered these deep, rich Southern Black idioms. And it's really important for us to recognize that rock and roll originated from the Black radical imagination, from Black radical progressive idioms. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry. Elizabeth, you could advance it to, yes, thank you, about the origins. And then we're going to play Samantha's clip after the talk. So next slide, please. At core, it's really the story that I wanted to tell with Rock and Roll Heretic is about the Black feminist imagination, cracking open white male tropes of both rock and the road novel, and framing it within the creative disruption of heretical Black women ancestors who refused, as Audre Lorde once said, to be crunched into someone else's fantasies and eaten alive. And when we think about heretical reclaimings, we're not just talking about disruption of faith-based norms and conventions. We're also talking about disruption of gender identity, respectability politics, a disruption of geography, disruption of sexuality, disruption of racial authenticity. And Alice Walker addresses this dynamic in her book, In Search of Our Mother's Gardens. She frames Black women's creativity as this constant process of reinvention, one that involves reclaiming the lives of, quote, grandmothers and mothers of ours who were not saints, but artists, driven to a numb and bleeding madness by the springs of creativity in them for which there was no release. And so acknowledging and calling out and coming to terms with the legacies of abuse that these women often suffered in silence is central to this journey and central to Rock and Roll Heretic. But first I want to go back a few decades ago to a Catholic school from Central Casting in Playa del Rey, California. I'm in the 9th grade. My room is a shrine to the Doors and the Beatles. It's festooned with albums and books and buttons and t-shirts. And during this period, we're talking about the 80s, my best friend and I would haunt record stores, conventions, and Beatle Fest, hunting for the most obscure memorabilia we could find. And I always loved electric guitar, particularly the sound, the texture, the propulsion of electric distortion as shred by the Beatles, Hendrix, Zeppelin, Neil Young, and Sonic Youth. And then as now, rock was largely dismissed by Black folks as, quote, white boy shit. Black kids who were into it caught hell for being Oreos, for being sellouts, for being weird, etc. And certainly corporate white supremacy in rock reinforced this dichotomy. Next slide. And this is a slide of Melina Moy, who is an international rock guitarist who came to South L.A. back in 2018 to perform for our Women's Leadership Project Future Feminism Conference, and she absolutely blew away the youth audience. And the majority of those primarily African-American and Latinx young people had never seen a Black woman electric guitarist, or really never even seen a Black woman guitarist. So this was a seminal experience for them. And certainly when I was growing up, I never knew that one of the early pioneers of electric distortion was a Black queer female guitar player out of Arkansas named Rosetta Tharpe, AKA Sister Rosetta, next slide, AKA the badass that launched 1,000 imitators from Johnny Cash to Elvis to Jerry Lee Lewis. And this was long before rock visionaries like Jimi Hendrix, like Eric Clapton, like Jimmy Page, like Jeff Beck, like Keith Richards were even born. And Tharpe, who started out playing blues and gospel in Black churches at a very young age, she was a prodigy under the tutelage of her mother, Katie Newman. And Katie Newman, it needs to be emphasized, was an accomplished singer and a mandolin player in her own right. And so Tharpe straddled multiple genres. She cut a country song with Red Foley, who was a Grand Ole Opry fixture in 1952. And so she has often been credited with recording one of the first rock songs called Strange Things Happening Every Day in 1944. And Strange Things was a so-called race record. It achieved crossover success. It featured Tharpe's signature distortion and her commanding singing style, which we're going to see in a bit. And in the early 20th century, virtually every genre produced by Black artists, including gospel, blues, and jazz, were dubbed race records and exclusively marketed to Black audiences. And in fact, the first so-called Race Record was a blues tune recorded in 1920 by the artist Mamie Smith for OK Records. Race records were essentially emblematic of a segregated music market that shut out African Americans, while white record companies and producers profited ritualistically, systematically from Black music by exploiting Black artists' publishing rights, exploiting their songwriting credits, exploiting them and cheating them out of royalties. And needless to say, this informs the trajectory and the dehumanization and colonization of African American cultural production in the 21st century. This legacy of the race record continues with the pigeonholing of Black artists, as Samantha noted before, into Black genres like R&B and rap. And it's especially insidious, next slide, when we consider the exclusion of Black women artists like Tharpe, like Lady Bo, like Memphis Minnie, like Elizabeth Cotton, some of whom are pictured here, next slide, and other forerunning Black women guitarists from being recognized as rock pioneers. So back in the day, in the 80s, at Catholic school, I had this conversation with a white male teacher who I've seen playing guitar at a few functions. And at that time, I played the flute. I also wrote songs with my friend, and I wanted to start a band. And when I approached this particular teacher and asked for advice about how to get started playing guitar, he condescendingly dismissed me and recommended that I try the bass instead because it was, quote, easier. And this really left an indelible impression on me at 13, because I was already intimidated by the guitar from not seeing Black women, or for that matter, seeing virtually any women guitar players aside from tried and true folkies like Joan Baez and Joni Mitchell. Next slide. So after that, I dabbled in composing with my friends, and I dabbled in starting a band, and I finally buy a bass a few years later in my late teens while I was at UCLA, take lessons, and quit after being sexually harassed by my instructor, who is a professional musician at that time in the community. And it's only been years later, in 2016, 2017, that I mustered up the courage and the wherewithal to start taking electric guitar and acoustic guitar lessons. And so it's in part due to my personal experience and passion for the rock genre that I wanted to explore novelistically how these histories of guitar boundary crossing, of sexual violence, of religious indoctrination and resistance inform the trajectories of Black women musicians. Next slide. Raised in the Southern Black blues tradition of visionary guitar artistry, Rory, the novel's protagonist, loosely modeled on Tharpe, is a former child prodigy battling depression. She's battling addiction. She's battling music industry marginalization. She's battling ageism. She's an older traveling musician on the road with no recording contract, no perks, no glamour. And she's fronting an all-male band who are also battling their own demons, whose dependency is an albatross as she fights to win back her publishing rights and regain her footing in the corporate rock regime of the late 70s, which is undergoing a turbulent transition. And so her relationship with her organist manager mother is foundational to both her creative struggle and her inner demons as a survivor of sexual abuse in the Black church and an infidel who rejects the Pentecostal tradition she was raised in. Traveling from a middling dive gig in Boise, Idaho to Nashville, she becomes entangled with the rock industry juggernaut of a Janis Joplin type figure named Jude Justice. And Justice Joplin, of course, signified this long tradition of white minstrelsy and theft, specifically white female minstrelsy and white female supremacy and theft that have historically informed the commodification of African-American cultural production in general, and certainly rock music in particular. And so while Joplin's cottage industry of biopics, books, and stage plays has really exploded over the decades, it's been only recently that queer Black women rock and blues pioneers, which Joplin stole from musicians like Bessie Smith and Ma Rainey and Tharpe, have received mainstream recognition for their trailblazing impact on American music as innovative vocalists, as innovative lyricists, as innovative entrepreneurs, who were also critically, again, being heretics, challenging these conventions of gender, race, and sexuality in the rock industry in particular, in the R&B industry in particular, and in music in general. And throughout my book, the Joplin figure plays this transgressive, quote, Miss Anne, or for contemporary audiences, you can think of a Karen as an analogy, who uses her whiteness to capitalize off the contrast between the hypersexual Jezebel stereotype of Black femininity and this trope of white feminine innocence. Rejecting the heavy proselytizing of gospel music for the secular heresies of rock music, which were once considered to be satanic, Rory is not only ostracized by white corporate rock, but critically by African-American audiences who consider rock to be a white genre. And this belief that rock is the province of white folks, next slide, is a byproduct of the wholly artificial separation that was made between R&B and rock and roll music during the 1950s. If one Googles the term rock music, these are the images that come up. And so the latter became more associated with white electric guitarists who stole from the styles and songs of blues rock pioneers, later blues rock pioneers, like Chuck Berry and Little Richard and Fats Domino and Muddy Waters for young white consumers, while R&B was associated with so-called urban African-American music, further consolidating this apartheid structure that separates white popularization of so-called rock music from R&B. And so in many regards, rock music defied both Black and white respectability. Part of the reason rock or white R&B was so arresting, was so appealing for white America was because it subverted these bourgeois Eurocentric conventions of morality and social conduct based upon Western mind-body binaries, which denigrated the body, denigrated sexuality, and denigrated sexual expression as being of a lower, more primitive order. And this is certainly why, if we look at the early newsreels of Elvis Presley, that his sexuality and his gyrating hips and wild propulsive guitar, i.e. theft of Black musical idioms, elicited a firestorm in the 50s among the white middle class and within the white hinterlands, because supposedly only Negro primitives did these things in so-called seedy Jim Crow juke joints. Respectability refers to adherence to social norms that prescribe, again, bourgeois conventions of speech, of dress, of self-presentation, and morality, and religion being a cornerstone for social and cultural enforcement. For Black women, respectability politics demand conformity to these feminine standards of purity, piety, and submission based on deference to heterosexual male authority. And this is especially insidious for Black women sexual violence survivors. That's a recurring theme throughout the novel. Rory is a survivor of sexual abuse in the Black church. And in real life, certainly, if we look at the career trajectories of rock and R&B pioneers like Aretha Franklin and Tina Turner, they were also deeply informed by their resilience in the face of heteronormative intimate partner violence, sexual violence, and the Black community's silence and complicity in normalizing these regimes of power, control, and dehumanization. This lifelong battle against respectability, gender, and race norms continues to shape Black women's status in a white, cis-dominated industry where Black women unsurprisingly comprise, according to a 2018 Berklee College survey, less than 6% of female musicians, and even fewer if we look at the composition of female songwriters and female producers and female engineers who are working in the industry. And so this dynamic continues to shape, next slide, Black women's use of rock as a site of reparations, of reclamation and resistance, inspiring new generations of Black women boundary crossers and highway troubadours. And so with that, we're going to transition into the panel. We have a quick slide, a brief slide from a Spectrum News segment that was done back during Women's History Month when we convened a roundtable looking at Black women in rock, talking to some of the powerful visionary women that are on this panel. And if we could roll that, please. I think that's about 3 minutes or so.
What comes to mind when you think of the pioneers of rock and roll music? I'm Sarah Pila, and I'll show you how the upcoming Black Women in Rock Roundtable intends to celebrate Black women's contributions to rock music and the trailblazers that have been forgotten. Tuning her guitar has become second nature to Zori Petrus, whose passion for music started when she was young.
I started out in classical music when I was 7, and so I played the viola, drums, guitar, and piano.
That love has led her to moderate a virtual roundtable on March 27th called Black Women in Rock, highlighting the careers of Black women rockers and the importance of music education for girls of color. Zori says Black women are often seen to only belong in R&B or hip hop, not rock.
Like, how does the public perceive you as a Black woman musician before you even start playing and showing people what you can actually do?
Sponsored by the Women's Leadership Project, its founder, Sikivu Hutchinson, both a musician and an author, put this event together to discuss the erasure of the founding influence of Black women in rock music.
A lot has really not changed when it comes to the trajectory of the industry and marginalizing and erasing the contributions of African-American women in rock.
Discussions will stem from her book, Rock and Roll Heretic, a tribute to Sister Rosetta Tharpe, who you see in this footage from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame that shows early film of her performing. Tharpe was a rock music trailblazer, influencing artists like Johnny Cash and Elvis Presley.
Played a seminal role in mainstreaming rock, but unfortunately did not get her due when it came to all of the accolades and the recognition that white males have received in the industry.
The roundtable will feature contemporary Black women rockers like Melina Moy to discuss their experience in the music industry.
There aren't a lot of us being represented. So I think that it's important that spaces, that we occupy these spaces, that everyone has an opportunity to be in the space that they want to be in.
While Melina has made music history, the trail she's blazed hasn't produced an abundance of guitarists that look like her. But she says times are changing. She's seen a change in the industry since the murder of George Floyd. And with Kamala Harris as vice president, she says the door is open to more women of color.
As a first to do, play the national anthem and make history and do all these great moments, unbelievable, unbelievable. And I'm so proud. But real change is when I look back and see many.
And for Zori, she's hoping the audience will feel inspired by the musicians and feel empowered learning the origins of rock music.
A new way of thinking of rock music in itself. That's what I want people to walk away with.
Helping the audience find their own story in rock music by seeing themselves in the ladies of color who have come before.
Great. Thanks so much, Elizabeth. If we could advance to Gabby's slide, that'd be great. All right, I'm really honored to introduce this morning our first panelist. Gabriella Guitar Gabby Logan is an Atlanta native and proud graduate of Spelman College and Vermont Law School. Her background in environmental and music law fueled her desire to start and manage the international touring collective Guitar Gabby and the Texas Lips Band, LLC. Logan believes it is important for artists to be well-rounded and versed in many areas of the music business, thus inspiring women and Black musicians worldwide to be an unstoppable force. She is currently a contributing writer for Guitar World magazine, the board chair of Girls Rock Asheville, and diversity editor for Guitar Girl magazine. Good morning, Gabby, and let's roll Gabby's clip.
Like to be drowning in misery. Tell me what's it.
Excellent. And before I introduce our other two panelists, I actually want to, if we could, double back and play Ghetto Songbird's clip, because she has a real powerful, amazing segment that she provided us with. Let's roll it. Thanks. All right, excellent. Next, we have Zori Petrus. Zori is a 19-year-old photographer, filmmaker, and musician on guitar, drums, keyboard, and viola. She was born and raised in LA. She started out as a violist, dancer, and overall lover of the arts. Then photography and filmmaking came along soon after. She currently attends El Camino College in the South Bay here in LA County, and has been a member of the Women's Leadership Project since 10th grade. Much love to Zori, who I've had as a mentee for the past 4 years. Next, we have Brianna Parnell. Brianna, also another visionary, amazing, powerful young person, is a budding guitarist and Women's Leadership Project alum from Gardena High School, class of 2019, first in her family to go to college. She is also a student at Cal State University, Sacramento, pursuing a BFA in interior design and architecture. After undergrad, she aspires to attend Pratt Institute in New York and pursue a graduate degree. After college, she aspires to be an owner of multiple Black-owned businesses, not just one, but multiple, that will put wealth back into her community. Welcome to everyone this morning, and Brianna is going to get us started with questions to the panel.
Hey everyone, happy Juneteenth. I have my Fender shirt on today because it's appropriate. So let's get into it. I'm glad that all the panelists are here and all the attendees. Thanks Elizabeth for just hosting today's event. So yeah, let's get into it. The first question is, what inspired you to start playing guitar and writing, composing music? Anybody can jump off.
Okay, I was gonna ask. I didn't know if you wanted anybody to go first, but for me, I started just out of the struggle of not being able to fully know how to identify with myself as a young Black girl in middle school, picking up the guitar. I had been playing the clarinet. I played a little bit of piano and the oboe, but none of those instruments ever, for me, never felt like it gave me the outlet to really get the energy out into the world that I was looking to get out. And I think part of it, obviously is just being young and growing into the woman that I am today, and, just still trying to figure myself out and understand myself. But a key component that I did struggle with that is extremely necessary, not just to me and the other wonderful women on this call, but to the young girls that are looking up to us and women that are watching us around the world. And that small or big piece being comfortable in the skin that I'm in. And I think that a huge component of what I needed as I started off on my guitar journey was seeing other people that looked like me in magazines, on billboards, in books. I didn't have any of that. We didn't have girls' rock camps to go to be able to help mold my instruction of guitar and learning the music business. So for me, my journey just started out of wanting to figure out an outlet that I felt like I could be the best version of myself. And I also was looking for an outlet that would allow me to really dig into what it was that I was searching for inside of me. And guitar allowed me to do that. And then growing into, where I am now, for me, it's extremely important to give that back to the generations behind us, because they are going to be the future leaders of this world. They're going to be, the next editor-in-chief at Guitar World magazine. Those young Black girls are going to be the future of our world. And so to me, it's very important to inspire them as best as we can, so they can see someone that looks like them pursuing careers that they maybe thought that they could never have. So for me, that's where my journey started.
For me, I'm not going to even lie. I wasn't even thinking about playing the guitar. I actually started on piano as a little girl around 12, just playing around with the radio, things that I heard. And I hired a guitar player when I first started around 2000, and he would play with me. And one day, when I had all these gigs lined up in New York, he decided that he can no longer play for me. I was like, when we do these last gigs, and then you can move on and do what you want to do. Nope, he wanted to start his band at that moment. So I'm like, this can never happen again. I needed to know how to play for myself. So I went to Guitar Center and I picked out my first little Epiphone electric guitar. And I sat on my couch every day, all day, just trying to figure out that guitar. And I realized at that moment, because I was a writer first, that guitar was going to be my tool to get the message and the vibration out that I needed to get outside of myself. So I used that guitar to tell my story, as I did with the piano before, and as I continue to do with my writing. I think it's very important to find that tool that can help you express yourself and get everything. Like, I used to mentor children at a charter school, and we would play the blues, and they was like, we don't know anything about the blues. And I would play certain chords on the guitar, and they would actually identify. It would change their whole attitude, and they would want to express themselves. And I found that's what it did for me as well. I never said, oh, I want to be a rock guitarist or anything. I just played what came out of me. And I think it's a gumbo of everything that was in me as a little girl up to that point when I picked up the guitar for the first time.
For me, it's just growing up around various instruments, I guess. My mom, she always put my sister and I in different activities growing up. So we had we both started in classical music, which I'm glad I had that foundation, because for me, that seems like a basis for pretty much every genre of music, because once you have that understanding, it's easier to understand other genres. So just starting out with viola and actually enjoying that as a 7-year-old, which is kind of uncommon, that led to me wanting to explore more genres of music and watching my sister playing drums and guitar. So I had that in the household, and my mom being very supportive of us wanting to do whatever in the arts. So just having that foundation and growing that love of music at an early age, and continuing to want to work with people and be a part of something special, really. And just like you said, Samantha, expressing yourself and connecting with music that way. That's how I started.
Dr. Hutchinson, I wasn't sure if you wanted to add on to where you of your beginnings of writing and like playing guitar and just music. I know you touched on it a little bit, but are you answering questions in the panel as well? Because I would consider that you are.
Right. And of course, I had dubbed myself as an amateur guitarist, extremely amateur neophyte. But I mean, certainly I started out playing flute, and I started in the 4th grade at the age of 8 and continued into high school. It was pretty serious. We did concerts throughout the city. I did duets, I did solos, I performed in public at a public park commemoration once. So I had that under my belt. And as I mentioned in the talk, I was very interested in composing. Started composing in middle school, 8th, 9th grade. It was then called junior high school. And there just were not a lot of models, as all the amazing women on the panel have attested. You just do not see that affirmed. Black girls being able to sit down and actually compose a song, put together a melody, put together a bridge, do a notation. That's not something, unfortunately, that is inculcated into young people in our community. So we were really starting out with a blank slate, which is not to say that there aren't amazing composers and models, but at that point in time, it was very pop culture driven in terms of what youth were doing with music. Either it was pop, it was hip hop, or you were in a city band like I was. So there just was not, like I said, a lot of modeling, mentoring, or cultivation. And so that informed my early years, coming into some awareness about the schisms and the inequities that African-American girls were experiencing in the industry. Oh, and
That's
by the
really
way, I might add, this is just like a little funny factoid. We actually wrote a jingle for Rubik's Cube when we were in 7th grade. And we sent, I mean, it's just the most bizarre, like surreal thing, because my friend unearthed the recording of it and sent it to me. And it's like, what? This is like Paleolithic back in, it must have been 1981 or 82 or something. And we sent this thing off to the Rubik's Cube Corporation and never heard anything back, unfortunately. But so that was our first salvo at composing.
That's so cool. I wonder how that sounded. Like 1981 Rubik's Cube jingle. Like interesting. Like
I was actually singing, which is frightening.
oh, it's frightening.
I have no interest in being a singer, as you know. I'm totally behind the scenes.
Wow. So that's super cool though that you guys actually like sent it off. Like I love the ambition. I was gonna add like now I would say that girls of color are like more fortunate because Willow Smith is actually like, someone that we can look up to see doing like rock music, playing guitar. Like, it's not so it's still like, wow, like, Black girl playing guitar, but still it's like she's still like amazing and amazing to look up to. So the next question would be, hold on one second. The question would be, what are your musical influences and what inspired you, Plato? What early messages you get about Black women playing guitar and what are your musical influences?
Can you repeat the last part of that? Well, I can start with my influences. For me, I've always been influenced from a couple of different arenas when it comes to guitar. Learning about Sisters at a Thorpe as an adult, almost graduated from my undergrad, is when I learned about Sisters at a Thorpe. And also, I think being at an HBCU helped me to understand a lot of our history that I was lied to about. I'm sure everybody else was lied to about it. But it was a really good thing because it did help to influence the way that I perceive the world around me, which as a songwriter, that's a key component to being able to create songs and music. And well, not just music, to just be able to create, to connect with other people that you may never ever meet. I do believe that music is a universal language. So I think that the ability to create songs and to write songs, whether that's just guitar, instrumental pieces, or just being on the side of creating the lyrics, I think is very instrumental in how we connect with others around us. So for me, when it came to guitar, Sister Rosetta Thorpe definitely inspired me, not just because of her skills, but because of her fearlessness and willing to persevere through all of the BS that was, I'm sure she went through, because I know we're going through it now in 2021, so I can only imagine what it was like in the early 1900s. So, but just being able to say, you know what, I'm going to keep going and I'm going to do me, and you know what, that's just, what it is. So that definitely inspired me a lot. And then also, one of my other big influences from grunge music is Kurt Cobain and Nirvana. For me, it was a lot of it was the songwriting. It was the way that Kurt took, the things that he went through in life and put it through songs that we can all rock out to today. Every time Teen Spirit comes on, everybody knows the song. You get right into the groove. So again, just going back to the songwriting, I think it's it's a powerful gift. And so for me, those have been two of my biggest influences when it comes to songwriting and guitar, as well as Steve Vai and Orianthi and Jimi Hendrix and a lot of other blues guitarists from back in the day. So that would be me.
My influences is like a gumbo. It started off with my mother's album collection. She used to always have her friends downstairs, and I'm upstairs just creeping my way downstairs to hear her parties and playing albums. I would hear Jimi Hendrix, P-Funk, Santana, Mandrill, and all that good stuff. And it always made me curious. And my mom, she was actually a key person in the music industry that used to kind of introduce people to people. And my mother was dating a brother by the name of Lloyd Smith, who ended up playing for the Barcades, and he was the guitarist in the Barcades. So being around him was definitely influence. It's not like I've seen him play guitar in front of me. I've watched him on TV or whatever, but he would give me his 4-track and allow me to compose and create my own thing. He would never give me any direct help far as introduce me to anybody, because I think a lot of times they want to shelter you away from the industry. But just watching how he did things was very influential in my childhood. Growing up, I learned about Jimi Hendrix, Sister Rosetta Tharpe, Betty Davis, that people would come up to me and always say, you remind me of this person, you remind me of that person. Then automatically I would go check it out. Vocally, I'm inspired by Billie Holiday, very unique voice. And if you listen to her voice, it can almost sound like an instrument, like a guitar or even a flute, sax, whatever. You hear different melodies coming through her voice. And I love the texture of her songwriting as well as Betty Davis songwriting. So those are my deepest influences.
Some of my influences growing up would be, of course, Prince. My mom, she absolutely loves Prince. She saw him 28 times in concert, and that was my first concert, was seeing Prince when I was, I want to say like 7 or 8, and I saw him twice. So I'm very blessed that I was able to witness his greatness in person, because he's such, the way his mind worked with music and being able to play basically every instrument and write and compose for all those instruments, and giving a great live show as well, because some people could sing, but they might not perform the same or sound exactly how they do on the track. But with him, he sounded the exact same and collaborated with all these different people and discovered new people to bring into the music industry, like Janelle Monáe. I know she's really popular right now. He discovered her, and she's also a really cool influence in the music industry. But yeah, I would say Prince, and then someone of today that influences me would be her, because the way, and she's the first Black woman to have her own Fender guitar, which is amazing. And just the way that she does different, she can play different genres, whether it's rock, soul, R&B, she still sounds amazing. And yeah, and she plays multiple instruments as well. So I really look up to people that are versatile in their music and are able to give a great show, and are good people that give back to the community and just are great collaborators as well. So I would say there's so many, because my music taste is very eclectic. So, but those are two people that come to mind straight away. Yeah.
Thank y'all for that. Next question is what are some of the biggest, no, my bad, I'm so sorry. I'm like all over the place. What messages do you get about Black women playing guitar?
When you mean like in general,
Yes.
or
So the question is, what early messages did you get about Black women playing guitar?
I didn't get any. Besides, that's not something that you all do, or that's not an option, or why don't you pick something more realistic, or you sure you want to do that? Things along those are the only messages that I got. And as a young impressionable kid, at first I was like, I can't. Oh man, the white kids can. Why can't I? And then I learned, going to an HBCU. Then I learned that was ours, so we created it. And at the more knowledge is power. So the more that I started to learn and continue to learn even now, the more that I began to learn, then the 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 messages of you can't do that, or do you want to pick something else, became so far in the background that I don't even know, because I'm going forward and I'm choosing to walk in the footsteps that our ancestors left for us, like the sisters at the Tharpes and the Elizabeth Cottons and the Lady Bows, just saying I'm going to do me. And if you like it, then that's great. You're welcome to join this table. But if you're not interested, that's also okay. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. So for me, those are the messages. But I think that, to your point earlier, Brianna, and Zori, I think you mentioned her um, and Willow. I mean, just seeing all of these amazing young Black girls, all of us, just shining in our own rights. It's all necessary. It's all needed, and I think that we all play a very small piece to a bigger puzzle, to a bigger picture rather. And that bigger picture just being, helping to control the narrative of what Black women can and cannot do. I don't think we can't do nothing. I think we choose not to do things, but I think that Black women are, incredible, and I think that we shine in our own right. So, Godspeed to all of the amazing Black women out there that are kicking ass and just continuing to represent for the culture. Juneteenth.
When I first started, I really didn't think about that. I was just very private about my journey and took my guitar to New York and LA and did what I did when I wanted to do it. But it wasn't until I was on 106 in Park when I realized that people actually thought that they can control my journey. I would get hate mail from folks stating that I should not be playing the guitar. What is she playing? Why are you doing rock and roll? And I was really nervous I was young and impressionable when I first came out. I was really nervous about that. I was like, what's going to happen? This is my life they're putting on the line, because they would threaten me as well. But one day my mom told me, you know what? Before this even happened, you were taking your guitar and you were going out and you were doing your thing. Don't let this sidetrack you or take you off your path. So I would say about a few months later, I got back up and went back out there, and I realized the messages that I were getting were very loud and clear that they did not want me there. And it was many groups. It was white folks didn't want me there, Black males didn't want me there, and then the Caddy sisters didn't want me there. So every step of the way, people were trying to take it away from me, or trying to move me out of the way, or trying to sabotage me and trying to intimidate me and threaten my journey. It took a lot of strength to really continue doing this, because those messages are the ones that I want to teach to the next generation, that I have been teaching to the next generation. You got to go out there not looking at your skin color, your gender, anything, and just do what you want to do. They will try to stop you in every which way, but you got to get out there and do it.
Me personally, honestly didn't have any negative points of view about being a Black girl playing an instrument or a guitar, because my mom, she always encouraged my sister and I to do what we love. So I'm very fortunate about that, because like I said, we grew up with drums in the house, electric guitar, acoustic, and classical instruments. So, but I will say that there wasn't anyone to look at on TV, like watching the BET Awards or American Music Awards, any award shows. There weren't people that looked like us playing electric guitar. That's what I will say. Until, like recent years, we're starting to see that. But I will say that she's a drummer. Oh my God, why am I drawing a blank on her name? She worked with Prince. My mom will be so mad at me, but yeah, that's Sheila E, thank you. And my sister had a drum lesson with her, which my mom would be so mad, but that was like the only like Black woman of color that I would see in rock music and soul on TV and popularized in the media. But other than that, yeah, those were like my early messages, not really seeing anyone on TV that looked like us, or even in films, because there's various films and TV shows about music, but they don't really tell the origins of where certain genres came from, or any genre. So that's one thing. But in my personal life, it's been accepting, and people around me they'll say, "Oh, that's cool, you play guitar, what do you like to play?" But I will say there has been someone in recent years that say, "Oh, Black people don't play that kind of music on guitar." I'm like, if I want to play "Wake Me Up" when September ends by Green Day, I'll play it. But yeah, so like that can be irritating, but I just ignore it and I'll continue to play what I want. So yeah.
Yeah, just to co-sign what's been said thus far, the other thing that I think is important to emphasize is that when we're receiving instruction as young Black girls, we're not typically receiving instruction from folks that look like us on guitar. I know that when I was coming up, I didn't see Black women guitar instructors. I mean, that just was unheard of in that era. So that's another factor to weigh in, that we also need, in addition to just seeing folks that are on the national or global stage shredding and achieving in these arenas, we also need to have mentors in the community who are teaching guitar, teaching bass. So that was a big barrier for me. The other thing that you said, Zori, and I think it's been echoed by other panelists, is the self-censoring that occurs within the African-American community. This idea that you cannot cross boundaries and you can't disrupt barriers vis-a-vis genres. I mean, and certainly the paradox of that is that African Americans, hearkening back to what I said early on and what has been reinforced in this panel, were the trailblazers, were the creators, were the founders of Black rock idioms and American rock idioms. And so the fact that that has been inverted contemporarily is really problematic in allowing African-American girls and other young women of color to traverse these barriers and disrupt these barriers. So moving on, a question that's related to this is, and Samantha, you've touched on it, how do you feel that you've been perceived in the music industry? Samantha and Gabby in particular, because you're out there on the circuit, in the scene, performing, you have bands, you're dealing with all of these preconceived notions, all of this stigma and baggage that's imposed upon African-American women electric guitarists.
I, you know, I struggled when I first started the Tulips band, which it's an all international all Black female collective. I knew that when I first started that it was going to be a lot of bumps in the road. I knew there were going to be people who understood what I was doing and would support it, and I knew that there would be probably even more people that didn't like it and didn't want to support it. And I try to consciously, and I still do this to this day, because I mean there's still, life happens and there are still things that I struggle with along my journey. But you know I knew early on that I would have to put on a really good seatbelt for the ride that I was finna be on for the rest of my life. And I think that is, it can be difficult to get into that headspace because you have so many things, people in the world that are spewing nothing but negativity at you because of the skin that I'm in, or because I have dreads, or because you're trying to do something inside of a white genre, and fighting all of that, plus trying to exist as a Black person in this world, plus trying to develop and build a business and get other people on board with it, it's a lot. And then, just as Black women, we have the world on our shoulders. So it's a lot. But one thing that I appreciate that my parents did give me is how to look at life from different perspectives. Is your cup half empty or is it half full? For some people, their cup in life is always half empty. And for some people, your cup is half full. Sometimes it's half empty, sometimes it's half full. But I think that the thing for me that I had to pull out of that is that in every situation, in every comment, in everything that happens throughout my journey, is your cup half empty or is it half full? Because that's going to dictate the next step that you take. And the next step that you take, or you getting back up off of falling down into a ditch, those next steps are going to be what determines the trajectory of your career. And it's also going to help to determine the trajectory of the young girls and the women and the people that are out there watching me or watching us. So for me, I had to really develop a very thick skin to be able to dodge a lot of the hateful comments that I still get. And honestly, it's like, what can you do about it? You can't change those kinds of things. So it's like, I choose to try to consciously every single day to get up and say, remember what you're doing this for. Remember, you're investing time, money, blood, sweat, and tears, and it's going towards a bigger cause. Even on the days that I feel like what is the point? Some days I'm like, I'm doing all of this work. I'm tired, I'm stressed out, I'm broke. And my edges haven't been twisted. So what is this for? But I always have to bring myself back to that foundation that I'm so thankful that my parents gave me, which is, remember who you are, because in anything in life, if you don't know who you are in any industry, you're going to have a very, very difficult time, because that is human nature. It's the world that we live in. So I hope I answered your question in a roundabout way, but that's been my experience.
Oh, Samantha, you're muted.
Hello? Okay. Early on in my career, I had the opportunity to be shop at different record labels in LA. My mentor took me to Sony, and we'll leave the rest of them nameless, but getting my foot in the door, I was so excited. I had no idea what was coming to me. When we would go to these meetings, and they always had something that they wanted me to change. They wanted me to change my hair. They wanted me to change my skin, which I don't know, change my name. They wanted me to change my direction in music. They wanted to be more like NDIRE. I think I was perceived as too cultural and too difficult because I would never give in to what they wanted. They would also want me to have their band members and their songwriters and producers when I already packaged myself. And I already knew what I wanted to do and what direction I wanted to go. And no one ever said that, oh, your music doesn't sound good. They would say, oh, we love what you're doing, but we just can't do that here. So I think at this point in my career, I am perceived as too difficult, not willing to give in to what they want. So a lot of people don't really deal with me industry-wise, which is fine with me because I'm no longer chasing that. I am chasing my dream now, living for what I want, chasing the ancestral energy, the culture, being free. I don't want to be bound to any type of deal or any type of piece of paper trying to make me become what I'm not. It's not worth it. It never was, and it never will be. I don't care if they dangle it over me 1,000,000 times. I will not take it. So if I'm perceived as difficult because of that, so be it.
I really,
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Brianna.
I was just gonna say that both what Gabby said and Samantha said, like, I really back that up with head nods because especially what you were saying, Samantha, about just not even wanting a deal. Like, I feel like now a lot of people are like coming to realize that independence and, like, your creative freedom is like really important. So I feel happy that our generation is headed in that direction, like more so than like looking for like contracts and things like that. We rely on each other's feedback and just people's perception, not really trying to get someone to sign off on us and get a deal. And we're not really concerned about radio play because there's like the internet, so we like want to be more in that world. But yeah. And it's crazy. I couldn't imagine giving either of you a hateful comment because both of you are amazing. And I don't understand how people can't see that and just accept, your guys' beauty uniquely. So that is just baffling me. It's like, I getting hate, either of you, like, what? No, like, it's all sent back to them because you guys are living in your true authenticity. So like, there's nothing wrong with that.
One really, really quick note on what you just said. I think that the music industry is definitely taking an interesting turn. Compared to the history of it, and because a lot of that is because of the realization that you can be an independent artist. The only thing that I want to add to that a lot of people don't talk about and a lot of people don't really want to have to accept is that being independent is 5,000 times as much work because you don't have anybody just handing things to you. And that's why I think it's very important to talk to the young kids about this from the beginning. You're not going to just walk into the world and people hand stuff to you. That's not the way things are set up for us. You have to work for it. And that's just life in general. So I like to always add that part in there because I do think that there is a new autonomy, especially with Black women. Last year going into this year where we're just taking the reins into our own hands and saying we're tired of asking, we're just going to do it. But realizing also that there is a lot of work that comes with that. There are a lot of sacrifices of people, things, discipline. There's a lot of things that you have to give up in order to get what it is that you want, and a lot of people don't realize that, or they don't want to accept it.
Right.
And Samantha, you see more. Oh, my bad.
It's okay. Go ahead, Brianna. I can table my.
I was gonna say, Samantha, you see more like the do-it-yourself. Even you too, Gabby, like being a business owner and starting your own LLC. Like you see more of a do-it-yourself, and even that, and its own, is a lot. Just to start your own business and just blaze your own trail. So it's like, as a Black woman of color, like in this direction of rock, it's like a lot of like, do it yourself, I feel like, and that takes a lot of energy that a lot of people don't realize. So.
Yes, that's what I wanted to underscore as well. What you said, Gabby, about the sweat equity that's required to do this work, to put it out in the world, to wear all hats, be a producer, be a marketer, be a promoter, be an engineer, be on your P's and Q's when it comes to distributing your music. And granted, we have all these new platforms, but the reality remains, and I was doing some research about this prior to the panel, that you have this so-called oligopoly of the three majors, Paramount, Sony, and Universal, that colonize the entire industry and systematically exploit artists, particularly African-American artists, when it comes to ownership of one's masters, ownership of one's publishing rights, being paid equitably. So that's what I was wondering, that even as self-determined, autonomous, independent, badass Black women musicians that are in the trenches, I mean, you are still being disrupted and marginalized by these corporate capitalist structures that have since time immemorial dehumanized Black producers and exploited the creative cultural production that we have been initiating. And so I was wondering how you navigate that, given that you do not have, for the most part, union representation, collective bargaining, all of these protections that for generations have ensured that African Americans have some degree of equity within the workplace. I mean, that simply does not exist for most working musicians, particularly African American women who are working in the industry. So that's just an open question, Samantha and Gabby, if you wanted to respond.
I think relationships are very important, whether it's mainstream or independent, because I've been in this game for a long time and I haven't sent out a press kit or anything in a long time. The relationships I built over the years that may not be the biggest name brand people or the name brand this or that, I've stayed connected and I've stayed grounded. So now I can actually make a financial career out of this and not have a day job and stay at home with my 4 little ones and make that money through my computer. So I think you have to be very, very, very careful of how you represent yourself in the industry and who you surround yourself with, because those connections that you make when you first start can carry you all the way through, because they keep recommending you to this person and the next person, and you can constantly grow and you can live off of it. even if it's not doing exactly what you want it to do, like being the star on the stage. Honestly, probably make less money being on stage. It's the other business endeavors that make me the most money. And I'm very consistent with that. And I'm very consistent with my brand and how I represent myself. I went to the Art Institute of Philadelphia to study the music, film, and video business. You got to understand the business side. But for me, I like to take it a little deeper. As much as you got to understand the business side, because you can do everything right business wise and they still don't want you there. You need to understand who you are, and understand your culture and where this all comes from, because you cannot be rejected if you have a clear sense of self and what your purpose is. This is a large world. You don't have to stay in one place and make it. You can travel even by sitting in front of your computer now. Back when I started, you couldn't travel with your computer. You had to get up. And when I was doing it, we had to get up and go out, put the flyers on the poles, travel all the way to the next city to talk to the promoters. People have it easy, but it's not as easy as you think if you don't know how to talk to people and relate to people and keep those connections going. Just because you were on someone's radio show a week ago, you don't just leave it and move on. You stay connected with those folks, because those folks might lead you to another opportunity. So you got to stay grounded in this business. You can play all the top-notch places and have the number ones, whatever you want, but if you don't stay humble and grounded, you will start back at square one. So I try my best to stay humble and grounded, because this is bigger than being number one. This is about pleasing my ancestors, number one, and pleasing myself and pleasing my family. At the end of the day, that's what I answer to, no one else. So you gotta stay on top of your business, stay on top of your self-care and your culture. That's what's gonna get you through.
I echo everything Samantha just said. Definitely self care being one of the top things for me, and also just learning how to finesse the business. You know, learning, like you said, learning the business for yourself and not just trusting Kylo, my word. Trusting the business, or not just trusting what other people's word inside of the business are. There are going to be a lot of people that don't want to see you win. There are going to be a lot of people that want you to be confused about what you're signing and just, blindly follow them into the depths of hell. So I definitely think learning the business is probably the most important thing for me over the music, in my opinion. Because if you don't have the business, and like Samantha said, if you don't have those relationships, your hit songs are not going anywhere. And I'm sorry, my dog child is doing a lot right now, but yeah, but I think learning the business, but most importantly, taking care of yourself and knowing who you are is first and foremost in anything that you step foot into this world.
That is a cool segue to our next question, which was how do we more proactively support music education for girls of color and youth of color? Because when someone goes up to someone who's like, "Hey, I want to do music," they don't usually tell them, "Hey, learn the business first. Learn how to take that first step into the industry." So, yeah, how do you guys feel that we can put that information out to young creatives?
Samantha, were you gonna talk? You can go first if you want. Okay. um. Okay. um. I can jump in really quick and just so part of what the Tulips Band does is outside of the music, it's the giving back to the community, but it's also the education. So a lot of my work as a music lawyer and as a musician is rooted in education. So I spend a lot of my time explaining things to people in layman's terms and helping them understand as I'm doing with them, not doing for them. So for me, that education, and I mean, even as adults, because there are a lot of adults out here who think that they know what they're doing and they'll put on this facade on social media like they know what they're doing, that they understand, but they really don't, and will lead you again into the depths of hell. So, just really educating people through that has been one of my main avenues of giving back to my community, but then also through our Tulips Academy. We partner with hundreds of camps around the world every year in person, but this last year and this year virtually, to bring instrument instruction, but 99% of the bulk of the Tubes Academy is rooted in the music business. Again, teaching kids about copyright from a young age. I started reading about copyright when I was very young, but that was because my dad heard about something to do with protecting your music or something. They said you got to do something for it, so read this website. But getting into my career and starting a business and realizing there are people that are out here to get and to take and to mooch, I got to figure out how to protect all of my assets, all of the things that I believe God has given me to give back into the world. So the Tubes Academy for me is very important, just to be able to use that avenue to give back to the kids and teaching them from day one. This is the music business. You really got to learn it. You have to learn to harness your gift, and then the rest will fall into place.
Before I became a full-time artist, I was in childcare. I started my own business and I would go house to house taking care of sweet babies all over Philadelphia. And I found myself using music to calm them down or to even hype them up. Music and the arts was in everything we were doing, and I didn't realize how powerful it was until I just randomly sung a song that they might stop crying to. So I took that, like I said before, to charter schools and started teaching after school programs. Then I actually got a chance to teach pre-K music program at my brother's child care establishment in Philadelphia. And from there, I think once I became a full-time artist, I wanted to continue working with children in some shape or form, but I didn't know how. And little did I know that after shows, young folks will always come up to me and ask me questions. And I'm like, well, just give my email address, email me, and we can talk. And slowly but surely, I became a mentor. And I've had so many mentees over the years. I just love to mentor and share information, even with older folks as well. But children are very close to my heart because I don't want to see them have to go through the things that I went through. I want them to do better. Even my own children, they're in the music business now. They chose to do that for themselves. So now I have to teach them. So I'm teaching them so they can teach their cousins and their friends, and we can continue to have these conversations. But at their age, there are a lot of child stars or artists that get had all the time. So when they come in contact with their other artist friends, they can share this information and we can start having a better business mind in our youth. Because that's so very important that they understand that at an early age, because we don't know when that moment is going to hit, where they're going to have that hit album. We talked about Willow Smith before. She started long when she was a little girl. This has been a long time journey, and I've been hearing so much hate over her new album, like she just started this. She's been doing this for a long time, and she came up under the mother who was rocking, and they didn't want to give her props either, Jada Smith. So I think it's very important for them to understand this industry and how things work, because when that moment hits, there's no turning back, and it's ruined so many young folks. And I don't want to see that continue to happen. So I try my best. I'm very open on social media. My DM is always open, and I'm always getting young folks all over the world, and I love it. That's probably one of the best things I love about being on social media.
That's great, Samantha, because that actually transitions into our next question, which is, what advice would you give to an aspiring Black girl musician? If anyone wants to take that. Zori, given that you are a young Black woman who is conversant in a number of different instruments, you might want to talk a little bit about that from your perspective in sunny, beautiful Gardena, California.
Yeah, honestly, I would just say do research and do research on basically every instrument and find one that feels right to you, whether it's looking online or going to the Guitar Center or Sam Ash or a local music store, and just walking around the store and, seeing what feels right. I remember I was watching a TV show recently, and this guy, he was walking in a guitar shop, and the owner said some people say the guitar chooses the person, and that kind of stuck with me. I was like, oh, that's interesting. But yeah, doing research and talking to family about it, because I know it's not the same experience for every single person. Your family might be really supportive of you playing an instrument, but then they might say, oh, Black people don't do that, you know, because if it's not your family, I'm sure someone around you might say that, because I feel like we've all been there. I know you two have, especially with your huge platforms, but just me, you know, being I guess a regular musician, not like doing it professionally, people have said that to me. So just being aware of criticism that you might receive and just brushing it off pretty much, because if you have an interest in music, you're going to do it because it feels good and it makes you happy and you get to express yourself, whether you're playing or writing or singing, just doing whatever, you're doing it for you and not anyone else. And because once you do it for someone else, then you don't have that passion and fire to do it. So you're not going to have that motivation to keep going and practicing. Because I know Samantha mentioned earlier when her guitarist quit on her, like before the last few shows, right? You said you spent hours on your couch learning guitar, so you wouldn't have to be in that same position. You could just do it yourself. So I would say just finding what suits you and what feels right and just keeping at it, because you know it helps whether you're feeling down or you're in a good mood. You always get that spark of the inspiration. Like I wrote a song the other day, I'm still working on it, but I played it for my friend on Facebook and she was like, oh my God, that's amazing. So just being able to share that creative side of yourself with people, and yeah, I would say starting with research and picking an instrument and just going forward with it no matter what anyone says. That would be like my advice.
That's excellent. And we actually have a companion question in the chat that touches on those themes. The question is, when I was in high school, I asked my mom for an electric bass, but she denied my request because, quote, Black girls don't play rock music. Any tips for a 36-year-old who wants to learn how to play guitar? And love the tips for supporting music education for kids. And this is from Christina. Thanks so much for that question.
Christina, just do it. What's stopping you? At this point in your life, you own your destiny. Just do it. Whether you feel like you might fail at it or succeed at it, there's no failure really when it comes to playing music. Just be about what it is that you want to do. And if you don't like it, you can always move on and try something else. But you'll always wonder why I didn't do it, or have those thoughts in the back of your mind. Could I have done it? I say just do it. There's nothing stopping you.
My internet cut out, but I wanted to just piggyback off of what you were just saying, Zori. You know, I think that whether it's professional or not, you know, the negativity, the world, people around you is going to be there. It's going to be there regardless. So I would definitely say, you know, again, it sounds really cheesy, but it's harder than I think a lot of people sometimes realize when they say be yourself and really know who you are, because there are going to be a lot of things that are in the world, from the people that are around you, from the things that you listen to the food that you put in your body. All of these things definitely have an impact on your mental clarity, and your mental well-being is literally key to getting through anything in the world, but definitely through the music industry. I think that definitely making sure that you take care of yourself first and foremost, and on that journey learning more about yourself and loving who you are and being okay with being alone, because that's a very large part of the journey sometimes as well. When you're building things from the ground up, you're going to have to be comfortable with being alone, and those moments are going to help to define the character that you carry on with and that you give back to the kids behind you. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, that's a really excellent advice. And I'm just going to insert a quick reading from the novel. This is part of our sponsorship through Poets and Writers. And it echoes, I mean, really, it encapsulates a lot of the points that have been made on the panel in terms of self-determination, having to overcome low expectations, seeing folks, particularly white folks, hijack and colonize your music. And how do you overcome that? how do you come back from that in terms of your own sense of self-survival and grounding? So this is from a chapter called The Loner, and this is Rory on the road in Boise. It was the humming of random passersby that got her, the spontaneous eruptions at the grocery store when Rory was in line with her lethal favorites, a bottle of Jack Bean and a can of cream corn. The floating slips of atonality that dragged her by the ear at the gas station when she was putting another round of diesel in the bus with the last of mixed state disability checks. The gurgling snatches from a cracked car window cruising by at the end of the day. The driver finally settling on a radio station that wasn't playing commercials. It was a song you couldn't beat out of your head with a 2x4. Her invisible nemesis, her Waterloo, bloody hot damn. It was that miserable like a stuck pig summer when it seemed the whole globe was blasting Jude's new riff in unison. A 12-bar monstrosity that she claimed she'd dredged up from the bottom of the Delta. Tobacco-stained fingernails dirty and squirming with the muck of the ancestors, one generation removed from the Middle Passage, she drawled in exclusive interviews with the European trade mags. As crotch-sticky and miserable as the tread of June to August was, there was no worse torture than the hijacking of the airwaves and every inch of the audible world by the monstrosity. It burned up the US, British, and global charts, staying on top for 5 weeks, dethroned by an Oklahoma white girl group and matching blue gingham dresses, twanging Maybelline, which was Chuck Berry's song, to ukuleles, cowbells, and booming snare, proud one-hit wonders on the variety show circuit. To counter the noise, Rory swore off all media. Then she swore off Jack Bean, cream corn, and solitaire. Any whiff of diversion or corruption that would take her away from practicing. She accomplished it by going up and down the fretboard in her head, on the back of her seat in the bus, trying to tame the petty, niggling argument between her mind, telling her she was a spent wreck, and her disobedient fingers. Meanwhile, Jude had signed with the Proteus label, a subsidiary of the house of TBS International Records, Film, and TV, home of the Gingham Girls, pioneer in spreading artists across multiple platforms and bottling blackness to stuff down Ofe's gullets. Ofe meaning white folks for the younger audience. The deal was lauded in the industry for its fairness to, quote, talent, and all the A&R or artist and repertoire execs clucked in their echo chambers about the wide berth it would give Jude to control the production of her albums. Rory's upcoming appearance on Jude's tour was barely a footnote in the trades. She was supposed to explode with gratefulness to her manager and the label for giving her a chance. Shit, sunshine, and rainbows, even though her royalty checks had begun to dwindle each month and the accountant from her last label was perpetually out on medical leave. So that's midway through the novel, but again, encapsulating these issues that Black women are having during this era in terms of gaining control of their music, their publishing rights, their royalties, their masters, their self-image, their public image, all of these factors. So I think we have one last question. I don't know if we'll be able to squeeze in some full-bodied responses to this before we close out. We definitely want to appreciate and respect everyone's time, given all the Juneteenth events that are happening out in the world and the community. But if you could pose that question, Brianna, and then that will take us out to our audience Q&A.
Sweet. So the last question is, what do you think about white cultural appropriation and profiteering from rock music, and how does it apply to your experiences?
Can you repeat that one more time?
Yes. What do you think about white cultural appropriation and profiteering from rock music, and how does it apply to your experiences?
Personally, it doesn't apply because I'm not, they got something else going on over there. But what I will say is that I am, I think that as a community and as a culture, we have for centuries this has happened. You know, we're extremely creative people, and you know, things constantly are being taken from us. And I think that part of how we move into the future of the music industry in response to that is going to be, it's going to start with us. again, going back to education, I think a lot of times there are some moments in history where things have been stolen from our community by way of the colonizer really playing on the fact that that we weren't able to read during slavery, or things like that, like the lack of education and the ignorance, if you will, that was kind of placed onto our community with regards to this subject matter. So I think that it's unfortunate. Every time I see it on Instagram, I throw up in my mouth and keep scrolling. But I also don't allow it to impact what I have going on, because I'm not on a pathway to allow, that kind of stuff to interrupt, what the mission that I'm on, in the footsteps of Sister Rosetta Tharpe and all of the other amazing Black women that came before us.
This is exactly why I created the culturerockgriot.com, because it's almost like a companion for me. For everything that's taken away, I share something to give it back. And I'm not just sharing my story, I'm sharing millions of stories all over the world. And when I say millions, not writing them, but sharing constantly every day on social media, so it can keep going around and around, and they can see it and they can understand where it comes from. But I also interview artists from Africa to the UK, throughout the United States, to tell our stories and to share our stories, not being controlled by anyone but the person who are answering the questions, as well as myself. And I'm not there to control their stories as well. Basically, it's a platform for people to share what they're going through in their country, in their part of the world, so we can compare notes. And most of the time, it all comes up the same, different place, same agenda. And we have to be very, very, very aware of what's going on, because there's a whole nother rock culture in Africa. Sisters going through the same thing, brothers going through the same thing. There's a whole nother rock culture in the UK, sisters are going through the same thing. And we need to really come together and share our experiences and tour together and rock together. There's a whole world out there, like I said before. And it takes us stop trying to chase that one thing that we think is the be all to end all, and really come together and share our culture and move together. I don't think that we'll see the results that we want to see if we don't come together and unite and share that common thought, that common journey. It takes a lot of us to actually do that, because it's designed to keep us out of the way. And I really don't focus on it too much myself, because when I first started, I didn't realize all that was going on. I was just doing what I love, and I continue to do that. I understand what's going on now, but I work around it.
Since I'm not like professional, it doesn't affect me directly, but I guess someone who isn't professional, it can affect me, because you're seeing all these people taking your culture's music and style and hair, because I remember a while ago, Brianna, we talked about this in one of the women's leadership meetings, Justin Bieber's hair, and he has a huge platform. Yeah, the last hairstyle he had, I was like, oh my gosh, he has this huge platform and he's doing this. And not saying that I don't like his music, but it just, Gabby and Samantha touched on it really nicely. Like, Gabby, you said you just scroll past it because at this point it is continuing to happen. And I'll do the same thing, but at a certain point it's like, how much do I have to scroll to see, because there are certain artists I do enjoy their music, but at the same time, they're not giving credit where it's due, even like with their producers and sound mixers, whoever, they're not giving credit where it's due. So that's the main thing that bothers me, but because that could affect, young girls of colors, like, thinking, I can't become a producer or a writer or even a executive for Capitol Records or whoever, So I think that's the main thing that I would say is one of the bigger problems about cultural appropriation in the music industry, is it defers people of color from actually wanting to try sometimes. Not saying that it stops every person, but people who don't have a good team around them or support system, they might be extremely discouraged to even try, even though they want to. So they might just stay in their bedroom, and we might not hear their great music that they come up with, you know. So that's my point on that, my take on that.
I wanted to add one really quick last thing. I know I'm that person, but really quick, just piggybacking off of what both of you said, I think being able to be in positions as Black women, as women of color inside of this industry, being in those positions to control the narrative that's put out into the world is very important. And I wanted to quickly highlight that so I'm the diversity editor for Guitar Girl magazine, and I've worked on an edition that we haven't really announced it yet, but we worked on I just finished working on an edition that will be coming out this July that's highlighting all women of color in the industry, because we need to see ourselves more. We keep seeing the appropriation. We keep seeing the, taking without giving thanks and credit where it's due. So I decided, you know what? Let me just, join teams with women like Sikivu and Samantha, who are both going to be featured in this edition, just to continue to celebrate us and to highlight us, and just to go back to, saying, this is us. We thrive and we shine in so many different facets that y'all really couldn't even comprehend if you tried. But you can read this magazine and be inspired.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing that. That's an excellent platform. And just further reinforcement of the progressive, radical nature of this work. And as you all were talking, I was thinking about this tradition that occurred in the early 20th century, where you would have these A&R executives of small independents, and also the majors as well during that time, record companies that would go out and actually on the spot, in the fields, in the Delta, appropriate, steal, hijack the music of authentic African-American producers who were playing acoustic guitar, playing the diddly bow, and doing very, very early blues renditions. And these people would be paid a pittance. They wouldn't be signed to a contract. And then lo and behold, you would see a cover by a white artist, and they would popularize that race record version for the white mainstream and white consumers. So we see contemporary versions of this going down, insofar as African Americans continue to be shut out, as you said, Gabby, from industry representation, in management, in executive oversight, and what have you. So that's pretty insidious. So we're going to have to wrap it up here. Are there any thoughts or questions from the audience? Okay, I don't see any Q&A in the chat. And Elizabeth, are we going to be able to show that final clip from Rosetta Tharpe to take us out?
Yeah, we can do that. Let me just say some closing remarks, and then we'll go back to that video to close us out. So I want to thank everyone for this discussion today, and just remind you that you can purchase a copy of Rock and Roll Heretic, The Life and Times of Rory Tharpe by Sikivu Hutchinson from the Moad online store. Also, Samantha, one of the people in the audience asked if there were URLs or websites that we could put in the chat to purchase your music, and Zori and Gabby put something in there, but I didn't see anything from you. So if you have a website or a site where we can support you, if you could put that in the chat, that would be great. I just want to let people know that we also have 2 more programs celebrating Juneteenth today, a celebration of African American social dance that begins at 2 p.m. and a panel discussion that's co-presented by the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture called Juneteenth, Connecting the Historic to the Now, and that begins at 4 p.m. If everyone on viewing today could take a moment to fill out the online survey, giving feedback about today's program, it will be really appreciated by Moad. I put a link in the chat, and it should also pop up in your browser when you leave this Zoom. We also would be happy to accept any donations or have people become members of the museum. We look forward to your future support. And I would like to thank our sponsors again for making today's programming possible: First Republic, the Wilson Sonsini Goodrich and Rosati Foundation, and Poets and Writers. And as we end with this wonderful clip, I do want to just wish everybody a very happy Juneteenth. Thanks for joining us.